for the guest musician, Dave Morris. Hello. Pardon my running in like a crazy woman. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Los Gatos hybrid Sunday service. My name is, I have to check my notes, my name is Karen O'Brien, and my pronouns are that I know, she and her, although I should probably check just to make sure because I forget. If you're joining us via Zoom, you'll find a link in the chat box with more information about why pronouns are important and why we delineate what we use. I'm glad to be here with you all in person. I am in person now after hurrying, and via Zoom, and as a service associate for this morning. This morning, our minister, Reverend Fa Jun, will be speaking about spiritual bypassing, what it is and what it isn't. We welcome you here for a time of fellowship and friendship, searching, finding, and growing together. And now, with our guest pianist, we are very excited to have our opening hymn, which is, I wrote it down and I can't find it, number 1017, Building a Way. We're not singing out loud together, but chair dance.
And I did invite us, big guest vocalist, so let's invite Julie.
Julie.
So much.
A special welcome to those visiting today. Newcomers on Zoom, we invite you to introduce yourself to our community by putting your information in the chat box. If you'd like to receive our weekly newsletter by email, please send your information to admin@uuflg.org. If you're visiting in person, we help us to get to know you a little bit better by wearing a name tag. I see lots of big name tags today. And also there should be a green sort of get to know you card that will come around in the offertory basket. And if you would fill that out, that would be really great. Again, Oh, last, don't leave, because we're going to have coffee and conversation outside after the service on the deck outside. So please stay and join us for that. Good morning and welcome. We're glad that you are here.
Let us, before we light our chalice, give Karen a chance to meditate.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, let's all meditate for a second. So find yourself, we're going to do Reverend Fa Jun's trademark 1-minute meditation. If you want to learn how to do this 24 times in a row, you can stay after the service at 12 for our weekly meditation class. But for now, we'll just do 1 minute. So get comfortable. You can spine upright, but feel free to just lay back, whatever makes you comfy. And I will invite you to take a couple of sighs. Maybe don't, broadcast breathe. We're not supposed to do that right now. Behind your mask, you're probably pretty safe. But just kind of ease the breath out. Oh, there's the Buddha calling. You did it right. And that's a good reminder to make sure your cell phone's on silent. And I'd like to invite you to a very well-documented breathing method for calming the nervous system. And it's a 2-to-1 ratio of breathing. So we're going to inhale to about a 4 count. I'll do my count, and then if that's not right for you, we'll do yours in a second. But here it goes. So I'll inhale, 2, 3, 4, and then exhale to 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then I'm going to inhale, 2, 3, 4, and then I'm going to exhale, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's do one more of those. 2, 3, 4, and then out, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe naturally. And perhaps this worked the way the journals say it does, which is just getting you calm during the present moment. And if you feel anything like that, I'd like you to just savor that experience of just not having to do anything, be present. Get here in a group of warm-hearted individuals. Even if the breeze might be a little cool, the hearts around you are warm. And in that spirit, we'll begin our service today. So as we light our chalice, I'll read to you some opening words. This is from the source. If you've heard this term, where did it go? Sort of spiritual bypassing. If you've heard this, it comes from a book called Toward a Psychology of Awakening. I'd like to read you just the first paragraph of the introduction because it's really cool. Wellwood says, deep within the human spirit, now largely severed from its ancient moorings, there is a search unfolding for a new vision of why we are here and what we may become. Perhaps it is only now in postmodern times, when we have unprecedented access to all the world's spiritual traditions, as well as more than a century of Western psychology to draw on, that we can forge a larger understanding of the human journey that addresses all the different facets of our nature. The new vision we are needing is one that brings together two different halves of our nature, which have been cultivated in different ways on opposite sides of the globe. While the traditional spiritual cultures of the East have specialized in illuminating the timeless, supra-personal ground of being, the heaven side of human nature, Western psychology has focused on the earthly half, the personal and interpersonal. We need a new vision that embraces all three domains of human existence, the supra-personal, personal, and the interpersonal, which no single tradition, East or West, has ever fully addressed within a single overall framework of understanding and practice. We today shall endeavor to address that here at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Los Gatos. And in that spirit, let's invite our friend Julie back to the microphone, and I will be joining her for our next hymn. Feel free to sway along. This is Come Thou Fountain of Every Blessing.
Streams of mercy.
her.
Thank you again. Thank you again. So it is time for our announcements now. If you would like to sign up for our email, you can get our announcements. We have a weekly email that comes out called WhatsApp. And sign up again at admin@UUFLG.org. And there are several announcements today, and I think mostly they're yours. But there may be others.
I have a few.
Oh, go for it. I must stand down. No, I'm good.
Okay.
I'll take the microphone. Hello. Your minister speaking.
After the service, we're having a meditation class. We're doing that weekly, except when I'm not here, because I'm the guy who's leading the meditation class for now. So 12 to 12:45, and it's a practice-centered class. So it's open to beginners, to advanced people. We chit-chat for a minute, then we sit, then we chit-chat for another minute, and we all go home before the traffic in Sacramento gets too heavy. Okay, one more for me just now is that we had a great orientation session for being a sound tech. And if you would, please give a hand or a twinkle to Mark for being at this very moment. Doesn't it sound like something you can hear? Not if you did. Yes, we can. So that's because of Mark. Thank you. And we also had a minor we have some Zoom hosts in training. So this is just a reminder that this nonprofit organization is a volunteer-run organization, and if you want to volunteer for stuff, you can, especially service associates, sound tech hosts, Zoom hosts for our brand new, weird, difficult hybrid service that really allows a lot of folks to join in who aren't otherwise able to join in. So, and plenty of other jobs, but those are the ones on my mind today. Stay tuned in 2 weeks for a different list of jobs that are on my mind at Halloween.
Did you also want to talk about, I don't know what Cosmo means. Oh, okay. That's over time. Never mind. Are there other announcements that did not make it into the list today? According to what
Just one more.
Oh, let's see. I believe that another one. Okay.
Today is also, maybe you were in Bruce, but today is also a Share the Plate Sunday. You'll hear more about that when it comes to offertory, but just heads up, Share the Plate Sunday, we'll have a guest speaker online. It's going to be really cool. Don't touch that time.
All right. All right. Any other announcements? Okay. All right. Joys and concerns. Each week, we take a few moments to share with one another the challenges and the joys that occupy our minds and our hearts. If you have a joy or a concern, I invite you now to step up, come over to this corner, and we will light a candle, and you can hold the microphone and briefly share your name and tell us what's on your mind.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Sean Mark. First, I wanted to comment a little bit about.
Checking our Zoom phone.
Anybody need to share anything via Zoom? I don't see any chats. So, well, let me give a shout out to the squad who performed restroom rescue last week, especially Ellen. Thank you. And all of our building and grounds and stewardship members who are constantly, this is not a brand new building. It's a nice one. We're grateful for it. And it requires heroes regularly. So thank you to our heroes. We lit a candle.
I lit a candle for the restroom and the heroes.
Yes. Oh, and lots of prayers to the continued functioning of our restrooms. Correct.
All right, I'm going to light one final candle for those joys and concerns that are too tender to say out loud and will remain in our hearts. And so I'll watch when this lights itself. There it is.
With that, let me get my screen share re-enabled here on our brand new hybrid platform. And we are going to sign our next hymn. So let's learn the ASL for this hymn really quickly because thank you all for wearing your mask. We didn't have to remind anyone. We're also unfortunately not singing in the concrete. We're only singing up here. I mean, I guess if the Spirit, Holy Spirit, activate, you could like stand at the door probably, just because these are the protocols that our COVID task force has recommended to be especially safe. Perhaps there's an immunocompromised person next to you and you're an asymptomatic, all of that complicated stuff we've been trying to figure out for the last year and more. So, let's learn to sign the Spirit of life, shall we? Okay. If you're an ASL interpreter or fluent, then please come up and correct me because I'm just going off of what I remember from what I was taught and also swiftly reviewed right before the service today. So here's our lyrics. Spirit, and you're going to make kind of like an incense smoke. So Spirit, and then you make an L hand, and it goes up like life. So it's Spirit of life. And then come unto me. Guess we're still on the right page. Oh, Reverend Fa Jun, what have you done with the words here, buddy? All right, we lost the first verse somehow. But it's, that's the spirit of mystery calling now. Okay, so Spirit of life, and then we come unto me. It's just like you're beckoning. Come on, Spirit of life, I need you. Come unto me. Sing is like you're playing a little zither. Sing in my heart, and you just draw a little heart on yourself. All the stirrings of compassion, these are the compassionate stirrings. So, Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart. All the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind. You're just going to make wind blow like this. Rise in the sea. You're just going to make the sea rise like this. Move in the hand. We're just going to make our hands move something. Giving life. You can do shape if you want, make a little shape. But then justice, you use these little F hands, and it's a scale balancing, giving life the shape of justice. So it's blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. One more verse, you're almost done. You're doing so great. Okay, roots are like roots. Hold me close is like hold me close. Wings, you make a W hand, and these W's make wings. That's my favorite one. Song. Okay, so wings set me free, and from free you make another little F hand, and you go free. And then Spirit of life. So once more, that's roots, hold me close. My favorite one, wings, set me free. Spirit of life. Good old age. What do you think? Fun? And then now, if you're trying to remember that, or just make something up. And we'll sing it to you, and it'll be really, really great. Good. sprinkle yourself. That's ASL for applause. So, wonderful job. I will let Karen introduce our offertory while I figure out what I'm doing with this.
You bet. I need my papers. Actually, I don't need my papers because today, I can't do anything out of my papers, but today is a Share the Plate Sunday, and I'm going to invite Sue-Ann to introduce our Share the Plate recipient for the day.
Okay, so this is all set, and then once you introduce them, I'll bring them on. We're good to go, Suzanne.
You.
We have to talk about that one and that way.
Hi. Each month, as part of our social action outreach, we share the plate with a charity. All the offering, except checks and envelopes marked pledge, goes to our Share the Plate recipient, which this month is the International Convocation of Unitarian Universalist Women, also called the International Women's Convocation. Jerry Kennedy, the treasurer of the International Women's Convocation, is here virtually through Zoom to tell you how the IWC advances equity for women and girls worldwide. Please make checks payable to UUFLG and write STP on the memo line. And thank you, Jerry Kennedy, for speaking with us today.
Beautiful. So let me just spotlight Jerry here and make sure we can hear you. There you are. I still think we're in low touch, but I hold the mic up to either. Go for it, Jerry. Let's hear what it sounds like.
Well, good morning, and maybe thumbs up if you can hear me. Yes? Excellent. Great. Thank you so much for choosing the International Convocation of UU Women for your Share the Plate today. I'm Jerry Kennedy, and as introduced, I'm currently the treasurer in my second term as treasurer for the organization. I've been to your lovely church building in the distant past when we had a Women in Religion event there a long time ago. Although I've been in Seattle now for about 3 years, I am a Bay Area native, so it's nice to be here, sort of. IWC, which is the short name for the longer name, our mission is committed to improving the lives of women and girls by working for a world in which women are leaders in all aspects of their own societies, where women have economic power, they have access to economic opportunities, they have access to education and health care, including reproductive care, and are safe in their homes and in their communities. This year, we raised funds to provide computers for disadvantaged girls in Transylvania, Romania, so that they could continue their studies from home during COVID. And many of these girls have difficulty getting to school in any case, and so these computers will really help them in their education. We just completed a Faithify campaign that will help women in rural areas of Guatemala plant fruit trees. These trees will help with soil, prevent soil erosion in addition to providing food. And they'll be given training in how to take care of those trees. So that's just a few of the things that we've done. All of our projects that we support are conceived and implemented by the local women. They request financial assistance, and we help find grants that will support them in their projects. In our 10 years since the beginning, we have supported projects in India, the Philippines, Kenya, Bolivia, Transylvania, and now Guatemala. And we have one project currently running for immigrant women in the United States. Although we run a very tight budget, we still have expenses. Our executive director, Shofi, is our only paid staff, but just like the church, there's insurance and Zoom costs and web costs and all those other miscellaneous expenses. So one of our major fundraisers for these business costs is our Share the Plate program. And you will join in 20 other UU congregations around the country who have contributed just this year. So thanks again. I'm going to put our web address and our contact email in your chat box. And thank you again. If there's any questions, I don't know if you're set up for that, but I'm happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Jerry. I don't think we're quite set up for the hybrid of questions at the moment, but maybe you can field them in the chat on Zoom. And for those of us here in person, just a reminder, anything not marked pledge will go to the International Women's Convocation. International Women's Convocation, very sounds like worthy from what I just heard, way to use our shared ability this month. So thank you so much for being here, offering them out with us. Or you can talk to them if they want. If they look like they want to be talked about, I'm not sure. One sec, I want to live stream us because the kids at home want to know what we did. They want to know. Okay, Sunday service, where should it go? It should go on our page. Back when we were at home, all of this happened behind the scenes. Now apparently it happens in front of the scenes. Which, is that a theater, like the scenes, where that's like an actual painting, so behind the scenes? Oh, interesting. Isn't it? Isn't that just interesting? Okay, and then I just hit record. Okay, we're streaming live. We're doing great. We're in Fa Jun. You're doing fine, buddy. You can do this. You're a modern Gen X guy.
That's how you do it.
Set up grandma's VCR all those times. Yes, buddy. All right, here we are. So, spiritual bypassing. What is spiritual bypassing, and what isn't it? Would you ask them if they can hear? I can't see them while I'm kind of streaming. But I will just fix that real quick while we're asking for a sound check. One moment.
And yes, behind the scenes comes from the theater, where in the 17th and 18th centuries, violent actions such as murder or execution generally took place backstage. Behind.
Oh, so no, because they didn't have content warning back in those days. The rough stuff happened behind the scenes. Okay, I like that. Okay, there's my pretty face. Now, got this. Right, it looks like nobody seems to be complaining about sound. So here we go. We take silence as assent. All right, what is spiritual bypassing and what isn't it? Well, show me with your head. Have you ever, or your hand, or who's ever heard of spiritual bypassing? Has anyone ever heard of it? Okay, yeah, pretty good actually compared to what I expected. So this was a requested service. In case you're wondering, well, who cares? I never heard of it. Well, you should. Some members of our community have heard of it. So it's a requested service, and as I put in the description, you'll be hearing this term more and more, I believe, because it comes up in social action. This is a term I learned about it because I'm in the world of like spiritual meditators and esoterically minded folk, and that's where this word comes from. But nowadays, where you're likely to hear it is in the domain of social action. Pardon me looking at my phone. That's where my notes are today. I couldn't get them to print out. So spiritual bypassing. Quick intro. Spiritual bypassing. If I was still a spiritual bypasser, I wouldn't have just been able to do all that video and sound and microphones and tech hosts and stuff like that. I would be at home meditating on a mountain, just being poor and not paying any taxes. So we'll get into that in a second. But I wanted to give you a credibility statement. Why should I give you a talk on what is spiritual bypassing? Well, I rewrote my bio for this. Reverend Fa Jun is a veteran spiritual bypasser. Encountering spiritual teachings at an early age, he soon dove straight into the most world-renouncing aspects of them, preferring the austerities of lonely cultivation to the difficulties of long-term personal relationships. He has held the esteemed positions of Zen boyfriend, sensitive New Age guy, philosophical mansplainer, and before you criticize his tactics as uninformed by the real-world situation, please remember he's only trying to help you. Okay, fortunately for me, life has a way. Have you noticed life has a way of shaking us out of our comfort zones? The minute you find one, life has a way to go, oh, nice looking comfort zone you got there, buddy. It'd be a shame if somebody came along and shook you out of it. Oh, sorry, I gotta follow my notes here. I'm a little discombobulated by all of this stuff. It's not spiritual bypassing. It's difficulties in real world interaction with an internet and a live audience. Okay, life has a way of shaking us out of our comfort zone. A spiritual teacher of mine said it exquisitely. Spiritual work is meant to be an alarm clock, not a lullaby. So in my own experience, right on as I was on the way back, the road back from being a blissful space cadet, and about to hit the rough atmospheric re-entry into the real world, I was fortunate enough to find teachings about spiritual bypassing. Okay, what is it? Let me read you from the text. Spiritual bypassing comes from this psychologist named John Wellwood. And as we read in the opening words, he found that traditions of the East, that's kind of an outmoded way to say it, but that's what he said, so I'll put it in my little button for air quotes. Traditions of the East tend to be really good at like the suprapersonal, or what we sometimes call the transpersonal, like transpersonal psychology. And then psychotherapy in the West tends to be good at like the interpersonal and the personal, and yet rarely have those two informed one another. Rarely have those two informed one another. And so his work, he studied Zen, studied with all these cool meditation masters, and then he found what a lot of us have found in those fields, that doing all that meditation doesn't necessarily make you nicer, healthier, or more integrated. It doesn't necessarily, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And similarly, then, so he was like, okay, well, I'm going to go back to my first love of psychotherapy and become a PhD. And then he found that sometimes psychotherapy just sort of mires you in, like, have you noticed that the work on your person or on your relationships is theoretically infinite, right? You never finish that work. You never finish reowning your family of origin trauma or whatever. You never finish integrating all of this stuff. There's always work to be done. So he kind of proposes that these two realms actually must inform each other for us to have a complete vision of health and wholeness for human beings. What a lot of people in positive psychology and some of the new psychological movements are finding. So what is spiritual bypass? With that introduction, this is the original on what is spiritual bypassing. He saith, I'm sure you got the right thing. I didn't get the right page. I put the thing in there wrong. Excuse me. Starting in the 1970s, I began to perceive a disturbing tendency among many members of spiritual communities. Although many spiritual practitioners were doing good work on themselves, I noticed a widespread tendency to use spiritual practice to bypass or avoid dealing with certain personal or emotional unfinished business. This desire to find release from the earthly structures that seem to entrap us, the structures of karma, conditioning, body, form, matter, personality, has been a central motive in the spiritual search for thousands of years. So there's often a tendency to use spiritual practice to try to rise above our emotional and personal issues, all of those messy, unresolved matters that weigh us down. I call this tendency to avoid or prematurely transcend basic human needs, feelings, and developmental tasks, spiritual bypassing. So that last sentence, again, that's where the juice is. I call this tendency to avoid or prematurely transcend basic human needs, feelings, and developmental tasks, spiritual bypassing. So you can kind of get a sense of this, and if you've been a spiritual bypasser or have met one, you will know that, okay, if you've been around meditators for a while, you'll know some of them have terrible, terrible interpersonal communication skills. My sound just went off, James?
Yeah.
I was wrong on my estimate of how much battery life I had. This one's turned on, okay. Like I mentioned last week, be careful what you tell the universe. I'm going to do a sermon on spiritual bypass. Let's put you through some developmental tasks, buddy. All right. Well, I just need a reminder to put that back on the right mic for recording. Okay, so you'll know some meditators in the world, or spiritual people, like maybe you don't know a lot of meditators, they're still kind of rare, but there are people who go to church, who go, they're active, and they can be some of the bossiest, most narcissistic folks around. And in spiritual bypassing, what is often happening is that we are using it. The worst, the one that feels worse, is when they use spiritual platitudes to explain away their behavior. You'll see this kind of, I don't know if you see it in all churches, but you'll see it like in Zen and things like that. Oh my. Do you know that Lord of the Rings movie that they made? I forget if this line was in the book, but Gandalf the wizard shows up late, and who was it? Frodo, I think. So, why are you late? Gandalf says, a wizard is never late. He arrives exactly when he means to. Classic spiritual bypasser, bro. Oh no! Wait, let's see. I have a slide for this. Time is an illusion. But here's the, if time's an illusion, why was this Apple Watch so expensive? Actually, it was given to me. So maybe time is an illusion. But it's this idea to use, so like it's the Zen tradition, we have this idea like, oh, all is illusory and empty. And then if your partner calls you out on leaving crumbs on the counter and that's what you respond with, that's spiritual bypass. That's an improper use of emptiness or the illusory nature of reality or something along those lines. Okay, let's see what I'm supposed to tell you next. Okay, so where else you will hear about spiritual bypassing is in, so this is in, like, for those of us who coach meditators and spiritual types, and there's, oh, hey, what's the problem? Oh, you're a meditator. Oh, come talk to me. I'm Reverend Fa Jun. I'm a Buddhist kind of guy at the UU Fellowship. I got insights on that, sure. Is that this can cause real problems. It can cause problems in our relationship, or sometimes as your meditation deepens, there's a phenomenon that old work that you bypass, it doesn't go away. And so the deeper your meditation gets, the more likely it is to come back up in a very surprising form. You thought you were at peace, and now, oh, there's third grade again. All the stuff you sort of skipped over by adopting a new belief system. Okay, but where else you'll see this is in social justice work. So it's become increasingly common nowadays to question, probably rightfully so, I'm going to stay out of my shoulds, but let me tell you where I'm saying this from, to question the tactics of peacemaking and forgiveness, and wondering if those might just be spiritual bypassing. Right? So we here in the UU Fellowship, we have a lot, like we've got all of these quotes from Dr. King, and we've got all of these songs about peace on earth and all this cool stuff. There's a specific phenomenon when people are expressing their hurt or their rage, and someone comes along, usually with a skin tone like mine, often in a gender identity like mine, and they say, oh yes, but shouldn't we just forgive? Oh, don't be so violent, don't be so uppity, right? And the term for this is usually tone policing. This is tone policing. So someone's expressing, we need to rise up. These terrible, terrible things are happening. I don't know, to frontline communities of climate change. Police violence are happening to certain communities. And then some well-meaning individual comes along and says like, hey, but what did Jesus tell us? Or we come in, hey, I'm a Buddhist, and I want to let you know that anger is like holding a hot coal in your hand and expecting the other person to be burned. So calm down, right? Then spiritual bypassing, because I'm uncomfortable with anger, I tone police others. Because I've bypassed that in myself, I bring that and I am encouraging others to bypass that as well. Oh, these problems, there's no problem that we can't just heal through thoughts and prayers. Don't be so adversarial. I'm a Taoist and we try to follow the watercourse way. So how can we blend with these circumstances? And it becomes a question like, well, how do you blend with disproportionate police violence to young men of color? How do you blend with that, bro? It might be spiritually bypassing. Okay, am I making any sense out of these? We're in definitions, right? What is spiritual bypassing? And then subnote, why should you care? Because it's actually kind of an important thing. It's kind of an important thing. There are little phenomena of it, of people of privilege, like myself. You know, that the white, cisgendered, hetero, middle-aged man that you've heard about, who's trying to use it wisely, but it's really easy to use the privilege that brings. It doesn't mean my life was easy. It just wasn't made harder by not being all of those social locations, right? It's really easy for me to sit on my mountaintop and go like, no, you guys, just check out and meditate and it'll all be fine, and not recognize that some people do not have that opportunity to be so spiritual as I like to tell myself I am. So spiritual bypassing can become a real problem if we are trying to be kind and open-hearted. Okay. When people bring religious or New Age slogans into the mix, suggesting that we just let go of our anger and grief to improve our vibration or spiritual frequency, you are likely witnessing spiritual bypassing. It would be easy to get mad at people for bringing this tactic to the scene, but it helps if we remember the first main point of today's sermon. We did definitions. Here's the main point. The first main point, spiritual bypassing is a trauma response. Spiritual bypassing is a trauma response. As you heard from Wellwood, we're using spirituality to avoid developmental challenges. So I personally have been informed by research on trauma in the field of meditation and mindfulness. And one of the things that you need to know is, okay, you all remember when your nervous system is under stress or exposed to a threat, you've got your three main responses, right? Fight, flight, and freeze. Do we remember these? Fight, flight, and freeze? Okay, so rather than freeze, I'm going to plug in my computer with just one more little tech. I was prepared for it. Excuse me. Should have done this at the beginning. Oh, an assistant. Why, thank you. Let's see if we can untangle that as easily as we're untangling spiritual bypassing. Oh, it's so nice to have help. Okay, so fight, flight, or freeze. Hello?
There's a fourth one. Fourth F.
Fawn?
Block.
Flock. Ooh. Tell me more on coffee hour. Okay. For now, for what you knew a minute ago, we're going to do fight, flight, and freeze. And freeze is the one that we do when we don't have agency in the situation. So it's built in us. It's for a second. Like if you saw a lion, if you walked out that door and there was a lion out there, for a second you freeze. But it's to assess the situation so they don't see you. And then maybe they walk by and you shake it off. Whoa, you go find Karen or somebody caring, looking, and you go, oh, I saw a lion, and they hold you, and it's really nice. Thank goodness you saw that lion at you, UUFLG. So, and then it shakes all out. Or you might have to fight that lion. Call me, I'll help. I don't want to, but I will. Or you might want to book, right? But if the lion catches you, there's not much more fighting and freezing and fleeing you can do it. So your brain is built to shut down. Best case scenario, the lion thinks you're dead, and then they have this instinct where they're like, oh, dead meat? Ew, I want a fresh meat. there might be E. coli in there or something. I don't know. It's Chipotle. Sorry, Chipotle. That was a while ago. But worst case scenario, lion don't fall for it. But while you're in freeze, your brain pumps out these intoxicating chemicals. And one of the weird things about trauma is that sometimes, like, time slows down and you're just like, you're in this weird brain zone. And it's like nature is compassionate or something like that. Like, it doesn't want us to suffer too bad through these traumatic events. Okay, the challenge is if the trauma remains unresolved, such as like when you skip developmental work, skip going back and reintegrating that, we can mistake those states of freeze for spiritual and meditative states. Some of the best spiritual people, practitioners out there selling their courses to you right now are just experts at disassociation. Dissociation? My spell check always says it's dissociation. And I'm like, but you're disassociating. Okay, they're experts at dissociation, right? So why we spiritual bypass it? One of the reasons, well, it's so much more fun. Like if life is great, if you had interpersonal ick when you were 15 and then you found the church, then you found the Dharma or whatever, like one of the reasons we do that is because, wow, being in a spiritual experience where I don't think about all that ick is so much more fun. And it's a trauma response. Okay. So, don't be too hard on them. You do have to tell them to shut up and stop tone policing. But also, you might want to find them a friend who can give them a hug because they're enacting a trauma response. And unfortunately, we can't get people to stop trauma responses by inducing more trauma on them, which is what we usually want to do because they make us so darn mad. Okay, well, what about number 2? Oh, it's all connected, man. Point number 2. I didn't put the points up here on the list. Point number 2. Point number 1, spiritual bypassing is a trauma response. Point number 2, it's all connected, man. I wanted to address here. It's all connected, man. There's also a great modern Zen koan, which says, if there is no self, whose arthritis is this? These are spiritual koans that will cut right through spiritual bypassing. Like, back to the world, child. So, there's a great story about a young monk who was, his task was to meditate on his breath. And he came to his teacher, and later he's like, I tried to meditate on my breath, but it's so boring. Like, how do you get focused on your breath? And so his teacher threw him in the river. And he held him under for a second. Don't do this to your meditation students. And then when the student came up, the teacher said, how easy is it to focus on your breath now? Okay. It's all connected, man. One thing that you'll hear today, largely from your friends on the right on the internet, I don't like to single people out, but this is who the friends I hear from, is, why is everything so political these days? Have you heard this? Why is everything so political? Okay. For you in a UU church, I got to speed run this last part because we're running out of time. Anytime you hear, why is everything so political these days, you should think the answer is because we're living in a radically interconnected society. Our world is global in a way that it never has been before. And nothing you do happens in a vacuum. So it may be that once upon a time, well-meaning, spiritually inclined disassociators like myself could just stay on their mountain, and then my absence wouldn't maybe affect, I'm just here up on my lonely mountain. Nowadays, it's felt that even your absence is playing into the whole scene of our interconnected web. So if I'm over here and I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to be in peace and love, but I'm not going to use my pronouns in a Zoom meeting, it should be known that I'm normalizing behavior that costs young people their lives. Right? But it's just a meditation class. It's not it's not a social justice class with the Zoom meeting. Why should I put he, him in parentheses on there? What a pain in my butt. Why is everything so political? Because the lack of my he, hims on there fails to normalize that asking, hey, what are your pronouns? What do you prefer? That's totally normal and epic and wonderful, and that's a life-saving thing. Okay, I hate to do this one while streaming on Facebook, but when I trust my immune system so much that I don't need to wear them. Oh, don't throw your masks on the floor. It's okay, I got a spare in the other room. It's just a problem. It's just a problem. I mean, that's cool. Like, it's in your hands. And, as a lot of folks on the left will say, the moment all the kids are safe to get vaccinated, we really don't care so much about what you do with your own immune system. But at the same time, you're contributing to viral mutation and all sorts of things that are a problem for all of us. So, I personally don't care if you get vaccinated, but how hard is it? How hard is it, right? But why is everything so political, man? Reverend Fa Jun, I thought you were, and I get these comments when I stream them on Facebook sometimes. Well, I thought you were a spiritual guy. Aren't you beyond that? Yeah, I went beyond that, and then I took a U-turn and I came back to where the real spiritual work is, which is in the real world with real people who need to be loved, rather than my silly fantasies about a wizard who is never late. What's point 3? We're in overtime. Our quiet moments of everyday racism, homophobia, and misogyny are captured on video nowadays and spread by the entire internet. But even our absence is something that has consequences that affect not just us, but all those around us. Our refusal to live on planet Earth has real-world ramifications. The coming spirituality, a spirituality that survives in this postmodern, radically interconnected era, must be one that acknowledges its dynamic interconnectedness. That to not take a stand on things like climate change, racial inequality, or trans-exclusive practices is in fact taking a stand. Silence, in this case, equals consent. Okay, point number 3. I gotta keep you in overtime or else it would be incomplete. Point number 3, not all spiritual experience is bypassing. So, just in case, we could leave it there because you might now set yourself up after the service to go be the spiritual bypassing police, right? Somebody's at the protest and they got a peace sign up and you're like, hey, get the heck out of here with that peace sign, you spiritual bypasser. Tolstoy, you remember Tolstoy, obviously. Why? Well, because he's the guy who Gandhi borrowed his ideas from primarily, and Gandhi's the guy who Dr. King borrowed his ideas from primarily, and then Dr. King's the guy who Gene Sharp wrote his book on primarily, and then the die-ins of the HIV rights movement, and all of these peaceful, nonviolent protest movements, we can all maybe trace back to Tolstoy. Tolstoy wrote his whole book because he was a Christian. And yet, percolating down a century later or so, his work was very, very practical. That nonviolence, that spiritual experience of peace had dramatic, real-world implications. There are Theravadan monks who do exempt themselves from all political conversations and don't interact with the opposite gender. And they might have insights about how to calm your mind that you will never get going to the board meetings of your nonprofit and training to be the sound tech host, thank you very much, and the Zoom host thing, and hooking up maybe those spiritual experiences are also necessary and valid, even though they don't work as an argument against our anger, grief, rage, or activism. Perhaps they can live in their own domains sometimes. Okay, let me read you the conclusion. It's Libra season out here, you astrologers. It's Libra season. We did it. The balance, how fun. And so that's when my birthday is in Libra season. I'm a Libra, and I like to bring everything together. What if we could have really effective social activism and go on retreat and forgive past wounds and also know that it wasn't okay and never condone that? What if we could have it all? Maybe that's too hopeful for other times, but in September and October, we're going to ask, what if we could have it all in perfect balance? Last week we talked about ending the battle between science and religion. This week I'd like to phrase this in the terms of the meeting of the spiritual and the practical. I think a contemplation we might take with us that would be really valuable is, where do the spiritual and the practical meet? For me, I'm not sure there are definitive answers to be had here, because no one has demonstrated, at least to my satisfaction, that they know the one true way. We got to figure out how to do an echo effect on there. Yeah. Our self-extinguished our chalice. So let's rise, and I think Dave and I will sing to you our final benediction. Just hit a note. Yeah, you know. Oh, Juliana, go for it. There's your mic. Feel free to look in each other's eyes and say hi. Here we go. Joy, love, peace in our hearts until we meet again. Let joy and love and peace be in our hearts until we meet again. Once more. Joy, love, peace in our hearts until we meet again. Let joy and love and peace be in our hearts until we meet again. Thank you all so much for being here. See you at Fellowship Hour, or 43 minutes if you're coming for meditation later.